I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges that we're going to see with compliant fuels. This is what we currently have. If we look at the traditional fuel that we use, HFO, we're no longer going to be able to use it. It generally runs from 1 to 3.5% sulphur, and it's not an option unless you're using a scrubber. We have the distillate fuels, MDO, MGO. They're running at between 0.1 to 1.5% sulphur levels. So we can use those. But as we know from the ecozones, they have the challenges as well. Then we have the two new fuels that are available, or going to be available, which is the very low sulphur fuel oils and the ultra low sulphur fuel oils. These are generally hybrid fuels, and there is no standardization for them. So the ISO standard that we currently use, 8217, does not cover these. The current bunker prices, you can see here from Rotterdam earlier this week, and we've got a spread of around about $175 currently. The only thing I can positively say is that's going to change. What way it's going to change, I don't know. And why is that figure so important? Because that's the figure that everybody uses when they talk about the return on investments for scrubbers. So I'll be interested to see what my next panelist talks about when it talks about the ROI figure. But that's not the only issue we need to consider. Availability. It's going to be a problem. If we look at the world's largest bunker port as Singapore, will it be available here? What I've heard so far from both Shell and ExxonMobil is yes, it will be available here. At least the very low sulphur fuel oil will be, as will the traditional HFO. Fujairah, pretty much the same. Rotterdam, okay. Hong Kong is the fourth largest bunker port in the world. And yet, Shell will not have available any of these hybrid fuels in this location. And these are just the major ports in the world. What about all the other ports where we currently collect bunkers? Where are we going to stand there? I have no doubt that the oil majors, such as Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, they'll provide very good fuels. And those fuels will be available in the major ports. But that's not where all our ships go. Shell currently offers testing of their very low sulphur fuel oils out of the ports of Rotterdam, New Orleans, and Singapore. I would highly recommend any owner thinking of using compliant fuels take Shell up on their offer to use those fuels. So what's going to happen? Who's going to take up the slack where these fuels are not provided by the big oil majors? Will it be a problem? Will they provide the same quality? Are we going to see a drop in quality because of the dubious stock that's used? My previous speaker spoke about the issue we had in Houston earlier this year, which apparently came from cutter stock being used. I've heard that perhaps it was even from shale oil, where these phenol resins actually occur naturally. Are we going to see more issues like that? How will FONARs, which is fuel non-availability reports, how are they going to be handled? What's deemed not available? Does it mean you have to use distillate if the heavy fuel oil isn't available? Now the big one, fuel quality. The big issues with fuel quality, first of all, is stability. And stability is defined as the potential for a fuel to change condition in storage in certain circumstances. Bunkers stored for long periods may become unstable. The asphaltine content can precipitate out of solution, causing a formation of sludge. This process cannot be reversed. Will we see the introduction of best before dates on hybrid fuels? Is that practical? Then we have fuel compatibility, and that's defined as the tendency of fuels to produce deposits when mixed. Mixing of fuels from different sources can lead to incompatibility problems and loss of stability. Then, of course, we have the issue that's been around for a long time of cap fines. The level of cap fines and fuels supplied is likely to increase with the blending of fuels. So we have to become more wary on what we do with those cap fines. So what can we do about it? There's a few precautionary measures we can take. Firstly, avoid mixing bunkers from different sources wherever possible. Store the fuel separately until compatibility testing has been carried out. Don't mix straight-run fuel, which is those that come from the atmospheric and vacuum distillation process, with cracked fuels. And if you have to, keep the ratio to an absolute minimum. Avoid mixing fuels with greatly different densities, and where possible, choose fuels with similar viscosities and densities. Don't mix fuel oil with the marine diesel or the marine gas oils. If this is impossible to avoid mixing, then don't load on top in excess of a 20% mix ratio. They're just some of the common sense things we can do. When it comes to fuel testing, the ISO standard we currently have 8217. The latest revision is 2017. This standard has not been able to address some of the issues arising from the introduction to the market of several of the new hybrid fuels that are available, which are designed for operation in the ecozone, such as the ultra-low sulphur fuel oils that are currently available. Quality concerns specific to these less conventional fuel types is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. With the introduction of the new very low sulphur fuel oil, as well as additional hybrid fuels coming onto the market, it's going to get worse. The ISO team are actually working on the new standard, but there's no chance of it being published before the 1st of January 2020. There is a working group working on it, and the technical committee is expected to release what they call a publicly available specification, a PAS. The number is 23263 for anyone that's interested, and that hopefully will be available in early 2019 and may address some of the issues we currently have. The issues basically is there's no revision of the standard that's available before then, so the PAS is what will have to be used. How legally binding is it? I'm not sure on that. There's no universally accepted standard currently for 0.5% very low sulphur fuel oils. One thing to remember is in the ISO standard, there's a clause in, it's called clause 5.3, which states fuel oils shall be free from any material that renders the fuel unacceptable for use in marine applications. It's important that that does not get watered down. That is one of the only protecting clauses you have from any of these rogue components such as we had in Houston. We currently have a fuel testing standard, the 8217, which goes some way to addressing the stability issues that I talked about before. The total sediment potential, or TSP, and the total sediment accelerated, TSA, has specification limits of 0.1% in the current standard. That's a good guide to look at how stable the fuel will be. But when it comes to compatibility, it's not addressed in the ISO standard. We can use the ASTM standard, D4740, commonly called the spot test. It can be performed on board. It's a relatively simple test, but it does have limitations. One of the fuels must be a residual fuel. Otherwise, there's negligible asphaltines to precipitate, so it won't show on the results. Spot tests don't work for commingled distillates because of their low asphaltine contents. Additionally, the compatibility test can actually produce false positives for distillate blends due to the pigment separation. For the same reason, spot tests are not applicable to distillate tests with fuels such as the commonly seen HDME50. We'll need to we need to train our crew better on purification. As I mentioned before, the cat fine levels are likely to go up. They need to be better at purification. We need to ensure that the charter contracts include suitable bunker quality and liability clauses. So fuel management. MEPC met in October this year, MEP 73, and they've issued a Circular 878 which talks about the guidance and development of ship implementation plans of the consistent implementation of the 0.5% sulphur limit under MARPOL Annex 6. So what's included in this plan? It looks at the risk assessment and mitigation plan, looking into the impact of the new fuels. It looks at the fuel oil system modifications. Is there a need for additional tankage segregation? How do we transfer the fuels? Filtration modifications, are they required? Tank cleaning, how do we do that? There's several ways of removing the sediment associated with the residual fuels currently in place. We can do it manually. Do you do it whilst the vessel's in service? Do you have to dock? Another alternative is the use of additives to clean the tanks. That's looking like the most likely one to be used, but that depends on your operations. Do we have fuel oil capacity and segregation capability on board? Does the vessel have sufficient tankage to segregate the fuels from the different suppliers? Procurement of the fuel, the compliant fuels. Looking at the fuel oil changeover plan, including measures to offload or consume the current HFO bunkers that are on board before the date of 1st of January. Port state control. How are they going to treat this? Are we going to have any consistency in their approach? Their interpretation and application can vary across different ports, as we all know. Will they start to take samples? If so, where will they take those samples from? MEPC 74 will occur in May next year. They're due to approve the 2020 implementation guidelines and an amendment to the 2009 PSC guidelines. These will be submitted by the Subcommittee on Pollution Prevention and Response, PPR 6, which is due to meet in February next year. This is all very late for us that have to deal with these problems. We expect to have guidance, or the guidance is expected to have a strict limit of 0.5% for the delivered fuels from the suppliers. However, there'll be a more relaxed 0.053% for the use actually measured on board. So, what do we conclude from all this? The one piece of advice I will give is start preparing now. If you think it's going to go away, it's not. I know that many parts of the jigsaw are not there yet, but we need to start now. When it comes to availability, compliant fuels should be available in major bunker ports. Availability outside of the major bunkering ports may vary. Fuel oil quality and testing. Bunkers, make sure that you test to the latest standard. Currently 50% of the world's bunkers are tested to a standard that is less than the current 2017 for 8217. There's a huge resistance from the suppliers to bring it up to the latest standard. They're going to have to with the new ones. Test fuels for compatibility. Fuel management, follow the best practices. This has become more and more important. They're currently there, but do people adhere to them? Not so much, but it will become more important. Train the ship staff. Ship staff, we are all aware of it. I hope we're all aware of it. Superintendents, other ship staff, do they know what's coming at them? It's all very well us knowing ashore what to do, but it's the ship staff that need to know what to do, not us. And I will conclude on that note.